Welcome to Heart, Stories and Support from the Long Short Road, a weekly radio show where we explore the depths of mental wellness, sharing valuable insights, inspiring stories, and practical tools for healing. I'm your host, Leigh Ioffe, founder and director of the Long Short Road. I'm very excited to welcome the first guest to our radio show, Hadassah Zirkind, a colleague and friend. It's a big honor to have her here. Hadassah is a young mother who is passionate about starting the conversation around all parts of mental illness, including self-harm and suicide. She is the founder of A Drop of Light, an organization aimed at raising awareness around and preventing suicides in the frum community. Hadassah also volunteers as a crisis counselor for the Crisis Text Line and is both MHFA and Assist certified. Hadassah, welcome to the show.
Hi, Lee. Thanks for having me.
I am really honored and excited to have you here. Um, you and I both are very passionate about this topic of preventing suicide, and I'm excited to get into this with you. So can you share briefly with the audience your story and how you got to, like, how did you get here?
How did I get here? So, mental health, part of my life, depression, anxiety, forever and ever. Um, and it turned into suicidal ideation, suicide attempts, self harm as well. But that's, before the suicide attempts. And then once I ended up in a state of suicidal, and I realized, you know what, there's nothing for the firm person who struggles with suicide, who struggles with such thoughts, who struggles with, family members of people who attempt any of it, and that needs to change. And that's how A Drop of Light was born.
That's amazing. Beautiful. Can you tell us a little bit about A Drop of Light? Like okay, so let me ask, how did you pick the name? Like what was the impetus behind the name of the organization?
You'll laugh. I was actually just Googling different cool phrases, names that sounded inspirational. And then I don't know why the Pasuk, Maimer Chazal, whatever it is, saying Ma'at Ardeicha Harbe Choshech, like
Yeah.
a little light dispels a lot of darkness. And I realized, you know what? That's perfect. All you need when someone's in that really dark place, all they need is that tiny flicker of hope, that
Yeah.
tiny flicker of light, and that's all you need. So, quick Google search told me that A Drop of Light was not yet an organization's name, although it is now. There is another A Drop of Light, something else, which frustrates me, to be honest. But we got A Drop of Light. That's who we are.
Wow. And it's, it's so funny that, like, well, it's not funny, but I think it's informative of who you are as as a person and as a woman, that, you're a firm woman and a mother and a wife and a shlucha in many facets of your life. And that, this concept, which comes from source, from a Jewish source. It's such a beautiful bridge, you know, bridging the gap, I guess, between the frum world and the world of mental health, which they're not separate entities, right? But I think sometimes we think they are.
Yeah,
And maybe that's what causes, some of the challenges, is that we separate Yiddishkeit from mental health, but we
exactly.
need we need one to have the other.
Exactly. And I think that's been one of my main points. I mean, the URL of my website is preventfromsuicide.org. My
Yeah,
whole point is everything about my organization is, let's keep in mind the Jewish aspect. Let's keep in mind the
yeah,
from aspect, but
yeah,
also not compromise on the mental health aspect.
right. Why do you think it is, like you're saying, you put the URL prevent from suicides? Why do you think it is that that our community believes that there is a distinction between the two, or that, like, one, like, that mental health and Yiddishkeit don't necessarily intersect? Which, like, anyone who has learned even a little bit of Tanya will know that there's so much depth in Hasidus about mental health. Like
Yeah.
it's everywhere. And in Torah, you don't have to look very far to find it. It's all in there, right? Like
Yeah. All every drop of
everything, every drop. But why do like what do you just how do you reconcile that in the frum community we kind of I don't know. I've definitely seen that shock from people that like, what? This is an issue that exists in our community?
So I think, I mean, it's speculation, but I think there are two aspects of it. Number one, we're very private about a lot of stuff. You know, in the frum world, tznius, and by tznius meaning just privacy and not being super public and sharing, um, is a big thing
Of
for
course.
whatever reasons. So therefore, this is something that's so intimate and so personal. I mean, these are things that affect your day-to-day life, your how you are as a person, as a spouse, as a parent,
Right.
that
Right.
people are going to be so much more hesitant, like, "Is this really public knowledge? Is this something that
Right.
should be shared?"
Right.
And then I do think there's also, because of all the things in Torah where, suicide goes against halacha and self-harm goes against halacha and ivdu es Hashem b'simcha and all
Right.
these things that people, it's, you know, it's very easy to categorize the big stuff as, oh, well, a frum person won't kill somebody else because
Sure.
it says in Aseret Dibrais, don't kill. We
Right.
kind of forget about the fact that it also says don't talk not nicely about other
Sure.
people.
Sure.
But the big stuff is like, well, it can't be that a frum person would kill somebody else because
Right.
against halacha. So
Right.
this is also big. So it can't be because Tyra says.
Right. And almost and I that's such spot on points. And I appreciate that you brought up that part about the vulnerability and the tznius aspect. It is very vulnerable,
Yeah,
right? And talking about it doesn't necessarily mean we have to get out a megaphone or, live tweet or like Instagram live our whole experience, right? I remember saying to someone once, someone had actually asked me, how do you know what to share or not to share when you're talking about your experience with mental health? And I said, listen, if you were to give a lecture in your town and the next morning you would run into someone who was at your lecture in the grocery store, would there be things that you would be embarrassed for her to know about you when she makes eye
right.
contact with you in the grocery store, right? Or that you would feel would be too vulnerable and expose your family in ways that's just not appropriate, right? And that being said, it doesn't mean that we have to keep it all to ourselves because we weren't like that's not how Hashem created us to do things
Exactly.
alone, you
Exactly.
know? But to your point about, halacha and the fear of like, what does it say? Torah says ABC. I think sometimes we forget that because we are people of the book, we're not exempt from being human.
Exactly.
Like, yes, we have halacha. Yes, we have Torah. We have a relationship with Hashem. We know we're supposed to do the right thing. Okay, we're still human,
Exactly.
right? And like, if Hashem wanted a perfect world, he would not have made us with a Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara.
Exactly. And also, if Hashem tells us not to do something, he's not telling us not to do something that it's impossible for you to ever, for anyone to ever have a desire to
Right.
do.
Right.
Meaning,
These
if
are
Hashem has
accessible challenges.
exactly, exactly. Hashem has to tell us, the fact that in Nasser Sidibris, Hashem has to tell us all those things, it's because those are things that maybe will be a challenge to follow.
Sure. Sure.
And it's the
Sure.
same
And
with mental health. Yes, serve Hashem with joy, but that command is there because God knows that it will get hard, especially for some people more than others.
yes. 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 100%. And I do, this is just and I'm not speaking on behalf of anyone else. This is really just my thought on this is that, you know, you're right. All of those, every commandment, every mitzvah, including to be happy and, see see things with certain perspective. I mean, going back to Tanya for a second, I believe, and Hadassah, you could please correct me if I'm wrong, because I might have this wrong, but I believe that the portion of Tanya that we start learning around Rosh Chodesh Adar, I think it's Perek Yud Beis, is talking about what do you do when you fall into a state of depression. What do we say about the fact that we're entering, like, when you're entering the month of Adar, that the correlating part of Tanya is speaking about depression,
Yeah. I mean,
right?
yeah, I don't think it's Yud Beis. Yud Beis, I think, is the Beinani. I think it's in the Chafs somewhere.
You're
Honestly,
right.
Tanya
You're
is
right.
not my I didn't go to Chabad High School. I didn't go to Chabad Seminary. I do
I mean,
Fidas, but like
I did, and Tanya is still something that I'm wrapping my head around. So,
but yes, they ultimately the fact that there are multiple chapters in Tanya, and Tanya is a sefer. It's called Sefer Shel Beinanim. It's for
right,
those people who have pretty much vanquished their Yetzer Hara, that they're living, they're
right,
not a tzaddik because their Yetzer Hara still is there, but they're living on a state of pretty perfection.
right,
And it's a level that's attainable to all of us, the Tanya says. But the fact that there are so many chapters dedicated towards depression
right.
tells you something. It
Yeah,
tells you something.
yeah. It's, we are not exempt. And one more thing I'll say on Tanya, which to strengthen that point before I go on to the next question, is the Alter Rebbe wrote Tanya in many ways as a response to the fact that he was so overwhelmed by people coming to him for a
Hmm.
private audience to talk to him one on one with all of their emotional, psychological, and spiritual challenges. I know for myself that when I think of the Hasidim of the days of old, I picture perfect people. Like, really,
Yeah.
I do. Right? Like, remember the books, the Jewish bedtime stories of Jewish values? Like, do you remember those?
Yes, yes, yes,
So,
yes.
like, I had those in my childhood, and now I'm reading them to my children, and it's so funny how they really like highlight all of the beautiful aspects of the mitzvah or the deed that happens, but they leave out a lot of the struggle part. And
Yes.
I remember growing up thinking like, oh, the Rebbes, all of the Rebbeim's Hasidim, and I'm not just talking about Hasidei Chabad,
No.
Breslev,
Yeah.
everyone, they were all perfect people.
Perfect.
And
Exactly.
but then as an adult, I've learned Chabad Hasidus, I've learned Rabbi Nachman's Torah. No, they're talking B'davka to people who are struggling with physical, emotional,
Yeah.
spiritual, intellectual, mental challenges because they were just as human as are,
Exactly.
a couple hundred years ago. And
Exactly.
but I think that's also such a beautiful fact that all of this, it's so empowering for me to know that all of this wisdom about our mental health is accessible from a Torah perspective, and
Yeah.
also that can embolden us to understand more about our mental health.
Yeah.
You know,
100%.
um, what do you think the misconceptions are? Like in your work, doing the things you do, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the specific project that you recently ran that I'm very excited to chat with you about. Um, I can imagine. And I know from running my own mental health organization that when you approach people to talk to them about self-harm and suicide, you might be met with some pushback and misconception. What kind of things have you come across in your work?
The biggest one is still, the typical big one that, but how can we talk about it? Won't that make someone become suicidal? Won't that,
Mm-hmm.
plant the idea in their head?
Mm-hmm.
And no, it will not. Asking
Right.
someone, "Are you having thoughts of suicide?" is the safest question you can
Absolutely.
ask them, not a dangerous one.
Yeah.
It's definitely the biggest one. I've also heard, "What's the point? Stigmas can't be broken."
Ooh.
Yeah, that was one I heard recently, which I didn't in the moment, I didn't know how to respond, but I could respond here to if he ever listens to this. Um, 25 years ago, when someone had a Down syndrome child, that child was hidden. That child was put
Yeah.
away. People didn't
Yeah.
even know that they had a sibling,
Wow.
somebody. There were, I, a very close family friend, has two children, adopted children, Down syndrome, the most amazing, a son and a daughter, two Down syndrome children, that the reason she has them is because their family gave them up. They didn't
Oh
want
my
them
God.
because this is 25, 30 years ago. Their
Sure.
families could not have a Down syndrome child. Today, You don't even blink when someone, I've heard of organizations that literally send gift packages to people who have a Down syndrome child. Welcome to our community. Friendship Circle
Right.
is the
Right.
most accepted organization. So
Yep.
stigmas can change and stigmas will change. We
100%.
change that stigma
Yeah.
around mental health and suicide in particular.
Sure. Absolutely. And it's interesting. I actually I would like to go back to the other misconception for a moment about the
Yeah.
way that the question is addressed. I think that it's so powerful, this understanding that it bears, kind of hanging out on it for a second.
Yeah.
I have, we've both been in suicide prevention in various ways over the years. And I think that it's still, I don't know if I would say surprised, but I do it is, yeah, it is surprising to me still in 2025 that people are afraid to address this issue head on. Why is it so important to ask this question? Like, why wouldn't you just say, either not address it at all, or because it's dangerous, or, say something a little bit more vague? Like, oh, are you okay? Or like, are you thinking of hurting yourself? Or like, is something wrong? Why is it important to be that direct?
Right. So the main reason that to be that direct is you want to be clear. Meaning, if I'm asking someone, "Are you okay?" It's really easy to say yes
Right.
when you're really not. Now,
Right.
yes, people could also answer, "No, I'm not having thoughts of suicide," when they are, but studies have shown otherwise. And as someone who has lived through suicidal ideation and all of that, I am more when I know someone is asking me from a genuine place in a genuine, caring way, I
Right.
will respond truthfully.
Right.
Now,
Right.
it is important just when I'm mentioning that genuine, caring place, when we're saying ask directly, we're not saying to ask, "Oh, you're not thinking of suicide, are you?"
Sure.
Or,
Sure.
in that kind of phrase, because that's not called caring, that's not called opening the invitation, that's called judging.
Right.
Um, but
Right. You
if
don't want to be like, oh, you're not thinking about suicide, are you? Because if you are, like, we're going to the emergency room right now, and like we're gonna
exactly,
do this and this and this. It has
exactly,
to be kind and compassionate
exactly.
and just as like we do, it's a vulnerable question to ask.
Yeah, 100%. Um, and the reason why it's important to ask suicide and not just are you thinking of hurting yourself or something to that effect is when someone hears am I thinking of hurting myself, that could mean self-harm, that could
Right.
mean suicide. So I could say no because I have no intention of engaging in self-harm, but I am suicidal because those two,
Right.
as much as for a lot of people they've struggled with both, they do not go hand in hand. There are
Sure.
people who have one and not the other, and it's
Hmm.
very common to have one and not the other. They call depression and anxiety cousins, like they always come together. Self-harm and suicide don't necessarily always come together. So if you say, "Are you thinking of hurting yourself?" I could answer no because, nah, I was not planning on cutting myself,
Right.
but I was
Right.
planning on killing myself. So
Right.
asking straight up with the word, are you planning on killing yourself? Are you having thoughts of suicide? Using one of those two keywords, killing yourself or suicide, that it's very clear. We know what we're talking about.
Right.
Also, when we're asking this, we're not saying walk over to every random person and ask this question. And we're
Right.
not even saying to walk over to someone that you're worried about and ask that question just like that.
Right.
Come at it with, I've noticed A, B, and C. I've noticed that you have I had recently someone posted on her status some inspirational quote about something like, it's okay to not be okay, something, that
Sure.
kind of effect. And she's the person who her status is always pictures of her family. If she
Mm,
posts a status, it's pictures of her family.
mm,
It's never such a thing. My first instinct was, is she okay? So no,
right.
I didn't message her and say, hey, are you having thoughts of suicide? I
Right.
messaged her to say, hey, that status is really not what you usually post. Are
Right.
you doing okay right now?
Right.
And I was going to follow that up from there, which she said, yeah, she had just seen
Right.
it and it really touched her and whatever.
Mm,
Fine. I could let that go. But I've noticed you're not eating. I've noticed
right.
you're not talking as much. I've noticed something. that is often indicative of a struggle.
Right.
Are you struggling? Are you having thoughts
It's
of
showing them genuine compassion and concern
exactly,
before you launch into a question that could be very vulnerable and frightening to receive. But
exactly.
yeah. I want to move on since we have a little bit of time left to talk about a project that you recently piloted that I can say personally as a colleague and friend that I watched you build from the ground up over many months
Yes.
and was incredibly, I was very impressed. So,
Thank you.
um, you recently piloted a course on mental health and halacha for Rabbanim, and you just finished the first pilot, right? It was 4 weeks.
Yes, 4 weeks.
So like what inspired this and what can you tell us about the program?
Okay, so what inspired it was that the first time I was suicidal, and I'm talking sitting with emergency services outside of my
Mm,
house.
mm,
Um, my husband called the Rav to ask him a shaila, and the Rav's response was, "Explain to your wife logically A, B, and C."
mm,
Now, I don't think the Rav answered that way maliciously. I don't
of
think he
course.
answered that way because he wanted me to complete a suicide attempt.
Right,
I think
how's
he
so?
answered that way because he didn't understand that when we're talking mental health crisis, logic has no place,
Yeah.
and Tyra is flexible. And what I mean by
Mm,
Tyra is flexible, if you see on Shabbos someone having what looks like a heart attack, you're not going to hesitate to pick up the phone and call 911.
100%.
There's no such thing as Shabbos right now. Right now, what's
Right,
important is this person's having a heart attack. We need to get him help. Mental health crises are the exact same thing, and it doesn't even need to be a crisis, it could be to prevent a crisis. So,
right,
it's important for Rabbanim to have that knowledge because Rabbanim, especially this is a topic that's more and more spoken about, but that means that if somebody became a Rav, got shimush to become a Rav, even 5, 10 years ago, they don't necessarily have the the knowledge of what
right,
are all the mental health conditions and what does Tyra say.
right.
So my this course was twofold. We came at it from both a medical and a halachic thing. The first 2 weeks of the course was medical. We had someone who gives a MHFA course come and do a very abridged MHFA course. MHFA is mental health first aid. So he came and he gave just a basic overview of the common conditions, depression,
And I'm
anxiety.
sorry to stop you, Hadassah, but all of the educators in the course were Rabbanim,
Yes.
right?
No, not the
No.
educators, no, the people
Right.
attending had to
Okay.
be a practicing Rav.
Okay.
Yeah. So this first person happens to have been a Rav, but he is an MHFA certified trainer. And
Which,
he just,
like, can I just say, is that
yeah,
not the dream?
I know, right?
That's the
Exactly.
dream.
Exactly. So he just gave an overview of what are conditions. Week 2, we had a PhD. He is a psychiatrist, I think a psychiatrist, PhD. He is published author on suicide extensively. He came and he spoke about here are different treatments that we do. Here are different interventions. Here are warning signs. When you're getting called as a RUV and you hear these phrases, here's what that might mean. And when you're
Right.
getting called as a Rev and being told my therapist told me to do A, B, and C, how could I reconcile this with Tyra? Here's why the therapist would have said A, B, and C.
Right.
And then weeks 3 and 4, we had a Rabbanim. And when I say Rabbanim, though, I mean one of these Rabbanim is one of the top medical Rabbanim. Like he is the Dayan for Satmar on all medical related shilas. He runs a
Incredible.
refuah helpline. He is one of the main Rabbanim of Chai Lifeline. Like he does medical in general, but mental health specific as well. And they came and they gave, first of all, sources of all these places in Tyra that it talks about suicide in Tyra and
Wow.
how to address somebody who, because of how depressed he is, wants to kill himself. Like
Wow.
we have these cases in Tyra that people don't
It's
know about.
amazing.
And then,
I'm surprised to hear this because
yeah,
I
it
know
was
I
fascinating.
can I can think of maybe one or two instances in Torah,
Yeah.
But like I imagined there were more, but even I'm
Yeah.
surprised to hear
So
this.
this is, in Gemara, in the Rambam, places
Incredible.
where they're giving stories. And then these Rabbanim also came and gave practical examples, which was the most important part ultimately. They said, so when I got a phone call and the question was such and such, and I'm not going to share the questions here because ultimately
Sure.
call your Rav. This is not stuff we don't go and blanket psak over a radio show. But please know to call your Rav, and call your Rav meaning, could you use a warm line? Could you listen to music on Shabbos or Yom Tiv? Could you, someone who's going inpatient, if that's what's needed, Kashrus, Pesach, Shabbos, Yom Tiv, all these stuff, OCD, anxiety, the Rabbanim have precedence. And there is precedence in Torah. And these Rabbanim who took this course were now given exact cases and scenarios and how to paskin.
Amazing.
And what was amazing to see is the Rabbanim who took this course. We have people who are currently still getting shimush, and then we have people who from the biggest names of Rabbanim who are taking this
Incredible.
course.
Incredible.
Um, and I could tell you last week or 2 days ago, I got a message from one of the people who helped me organize this, that one of the Rabbanim reached out to him to say that he asked somebody if they were having thoughts of suicide
Wow.
based on the knowledge from this course.
That is powerful.
I
That
have
is
somebody else just yesterday who messaged my husband because he heard about the course through my husband, and my husband is a practicing Rav. And he asked, he said, okay, there was such and such example given at the course. I have a similar case, A, B, and C. How does this work?
amazing.
It's amazing.
Incredible. It's really, I mean, I'm excited for this to be offered again because I know that you had 50 Rabbanim and there's going to be so many more who need this, and
Yeah,
it's incredible. You should be so proud of what you're doing and the
thank
work
you.
that you're doing to help the world heal. It's really amazing. And
Thank
Yasher Koach. And if people want to connect with you, they can reach out to www.preventfromsuicides.org or .com.
.org, and it's
.org.
suicide singular.
Okay, preventfromsuicide.org. Hadassah, thank you so much for being with us today. It really was like an incredible honor to have you as my first guest.
Thank you so much, Leigh. I'm honored that I was number one.
um,
Yeah, and thank you for all you do.
Thank you. Thanks for saying. Discover how the Long Short Road is making a difference. Visit us at www.thelongshortroad.com or reach out at info@thelongshortroad.com to learn more. Sponsorship opportunities are available for Heart to Heart. Take action today. Sponsor an episode to honor a loved one or showcase your corporation while helping us address critical mental wellness needs in the community. Let's make an impact together. On behalf of the Long Short Road, this is Leigh Ioffe reminding you, hope is here and it starts with each of us. Together, we're walking this long, short road to healing. Good night.